September 21st, 1944. On a bridge in the Dutch town of Arnhem, one battalion had been holding for 4 days, against a full division of Waffen-SS Panzer troops. Fewer than 700 men were still fighting. They had no anti-tank ammunition left. Their radios could not reach the division commander 4 miles away, much less the army coming from the south. And the army coming from the south was still fighting for the last bridge between them. 4 days earlier, Operation Market Garden had begun as the boldest airborne operation ever attempted. 3 Allied airborne divisions, more than 30,000 men dropped behind German lines. 1 armored corps racing north on a single road. 5 bridges to capture. 4 days to reach the last one. The prize: cross the Rhine before winter. End the war in 1944. Bernard Montgomery had planned it. Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks was leading the ground force with battle-tested divisions. Aerial photographs had shown the terrain in detail. The Dutch resistance had provided ground intelligence. Yet none of it was enough. So why couldn't they reach Arnhem? The plan nobody could save. To understand why Market Garden happened, you have to understand where the Allied armies were in the first week of September 1944. 3 months after D-Day, the Wehrmacht in the West was in near collapse. Paris had fallen on August 25th. Antwerp had been liberated on September 4th. Patton's Third Army was at the Moselle. Hodges's First Army was at the German border. Montgomery's 21st Army Group had swept across Belgium in 10 days. German losses in Normandy, killed, wounded, captured, exceeded 400,000 men. What survived was pouring eastward, most of it on foot, discarding equipment. To Allied intelligence in early September, one conclusion seemed almost unavoidable. The German army in the West was finished. But something else was also true. The Allied armies had outrun their supply chains. Fuel had to travel from beach depots in Normandy across 400 miles of overworked truck routes. Ammunition rationing had begun. Patton's tanks were being ordered to hold in place because there was no gasoline to move them. At exactly the moment the German army looked ready to collapse, the Allies were running out of the fuel needed to finish the job. Into this narrow window, a collapsing enemy, an exhausted supply chain, Bernard Montgomery brought a proposal. If the war could be ended by Christmas, it had to be ended now. Not by broad front advance, which the fuel could not sustain. By a single, narrow thrust, deep into Germany, across the Rhine, before the enemy recovered. The proposal was called Comet, then revised, then renamed. Market Garden. Eisenhower approved it. Bradley did not object. Every senior Allied commander who saw the plan believed it could work. So did Montgomery. They all had good reasons. Those reasons would come apart one by one over 9 days in September. Before we continue, I'm Charles Mercer, and this is the World War II Grognard. My grandson Will and I spend countless hours researching and writing these documentaries because we believe the Second World War deserves to be understood, not just remembered. Independent channels like ours survive because of people who choose to subscribe. If you enjoy this kind of history, we'd be honored to have you with us. It truly means more to us than you might imagine. Now, back to the story. The plan looked on paper elegant. 3 airborne divisions would land in a corridor 60 miles long from the Belgian border to the Dutch city of Arnhem. Each division would seize the bridges assigned to it. 30 Corps, a full British armored corps, would drive up that corridor from the south, cross each captured bridge in turn, and reach the last one at Arnhem within 2 to 4 days. Beyond Arnhem was the North German plain, open country, a direct path to the Ruhr, the industrial heart of the Reich. The scale was unprecedented. 1,200 transport aircraft, 500 gliders, fighter escorts running into the thousands, more than 30,000 paratroopers to be delivered across 3 days of drops. Nothing on this scale had ever been attempted. And nothing on this scale had ever been attempted deep inside occupied territory, 60 miles ahead of the front line, against a professionally led enemy. The plan rested on several beliefs: that the airborne divisions could take and hold each bridge before the Germans could react, that 30th Corps could travel 60 miles up a single road at the pace of a peacetime convoy, that the weather over September would cooperate, that the Germans in the corridor would be, at best, second-rate troops in headlong retreat. Each of those beliefs was defensible in early September. Not one of them would survive contact with what actually happened. There was one man in the planning room who had questions. Lieutenant General Frederick Boy Browning, commander of the 1st Airborne Corps, asked Montgomery how many days the airborne troops at Arnhem could hold before 30th Corps arrived. Montgomery told him, 2 days. Browning's reply, as later reported by officers present and preserved in Cornelius Ryan's post-war account, was, "We can hold it for 4, but, sir, I think we may be going a bridge too far." Whether he used exactly those words is disputed by historians. Whether he expressed the concern is not. The plan went ahead. Because in September of 1944, every senior commander in the Allied armies believed the German army was finished. The next 9 days would test that belief. September 17th, 1944. Between 1240 and 1400 hours, 20,000 Allied paratroopers descended over the Netherlands. They landed almost exactly where they were supposed to land. Weather was clear. Anti-aircraft fire was scattered. German resistance in the drop zones was almost negligible. For the first 4 hours of the operation, the boldest airborne assault of the war looked like it might unfold exactly as planned. In the south, the 101st Airborne Division under Maxwell Taylor landed near Eindhoven. Their mission: capture the road bridges from Eindhoven northward, keeping the corridor open for 30th Corps. Initial contact was light. Most bridges were seized within hours. To their north, James Gavin's 82nd Airborne landed near Nijmegen. Their targets: the massive road bridge over the Waal and the bridges at Grave and Malden. The Grave Bridge fell within 4 hours. And far to the north, 60 miles from the front line, the British 1st Airborne Division landed on drop zones 8 miles west of Arnhem. 8 miles. The decision to land that far from the objective had been made by the RAF, which considered the ground closer to the bridges unsuitable for glider landing and vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire. The paratroopers would have to march to their bridge. That march would take hours. Hours that no one at Arnhem had. Only one battalion made it to the bridge. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost's 2nd Parachute Battalion, approximately 750 men out of the 5,000 British paratroopers who dropped that first day. They reached the northern end of the Arnhem Road Bridge at dusk. They took the buildings around it. They dug in. Meanwhile, on the Belgian-Dutch border, 30th Corps began its drive north. Within 2 hours of crossing the start line, the leading Irish Guards had lost 9 tanks to German anti-tank guns hidden in the woods. The road was straight. It was raised above the surrounding polder. It was, in effect, a 2-mile-long shooting gallery. 30th Corps had planned to make Eindhoven, 12 miles up the road, on the first day. It didn't. The bold airborne assault was still on schedule. The ground force wasn't. 6 hours. That was the entire cushion Frost's battalion at the bridge had been given. It was a small problem, for a plan in which nothing could go wrong. The problem worsened on the second day. 6 miles north of Eindhoven, the 101st Airborne had reached the bridge at Saône on the afternoon of the 17th. Two American paratroopers were within 100 meters when the German garrison blew it. Just blew it, in front of them. The Bailey Bridge that 30th Corps engineers would construct to replace it would not be operational until the morning of the 19th. The bridge that 30th Corps expected to cross late on the 17th would not carry a British tank for another 36 hours. The Germans didn't have to destroy every bridge, just one. By the end of September 18th, when 30th Corps was supposed to be entering Nijmegen 40 miles north, the Guards Armored Division was crossing into Eindhoven, 12 miles up the road, more than a day behind schedule. Every additional hour on that road multiplied the problems. The corridor had to be defended against German counterattacks from the east and west, which meant infantry had to be stripped from the advance to hold the flanks. The airborne troops at Nijmegen and Arnhem were on their own for longer than anyone had planned. And every hour of delay meant more time for the Germans to reinforce the bridges 30th Corps still had to reach. Then the weather over England turned. Reinforcement drops scheduled for days 2, 3, and 4 were delayed. When they arrived at all, they arrived scattered, incomplete, and, critically, landed onto drop zones the Germans had already occupied. The Polish Parachute Brigade, meant to reinforce Arnhem on day 3, would not land until day 5. And when they did, they landed south of the Rhine rather than north of it, because the northern drop zone was under German fire. Two things had now gone wrong that the plan had not accounted for: a blown bridge, a worsening sky. Each looked on its own like the reason. The truth was more troubling. The plan had needed nothing to go wrong. There was a third thing. Something Allied intelligence had known before the operation began. Two divisions of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen and the 10th SS Panzer Division Frundsberg, had been withdrawn from the front in Normandy in early September to rest and refit. Their refit area was the town of Arnhem. The Dutch resistance had reported it. Aerial reconnaissance had photographed vehicles that could not be dismissed as anything else. And the intelligence officer who assembled the picture was Major Brian Urquhart, the chief intelligence officer at Browning's own 1st Airborne Corps headquarters. He was also the nephew of the man who would command the 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem. Major Urquhart brought the reports to Browning. He brought them again. He brought aerial photographs showing German armor clearly visible in the woods around Arnhem. Browning listened. And then, on the eve of the operation, Major Urquhart was ordered on medical leave for exhaustion. Lieutenant General Browning, the same officer who had told Montgomery this might be a bridge too far, is the officer most often blamed for dismissing the intelligence. According to the intelligence officers who witnessed it, Browning brushed the sighting aside. Those SS units, he said, were probably refitting with no armor. Whether he said it exactly in those words is disputed. What is not disputed is that the intelligence, once flagged, was not acted upon in any way that changed the operation. Why not? Because a plan that had already needed a blown bridge and a clear September sky to succeed could not also accommodate two divisions of Waffen-SS armor at the objective. If the intelligence had been fully believed, if the operational planners had accepted, at the top of the chain of command, that Arnhem was defended by two SS Panzer divisions, the operation would have had to be canceled. And no one at the top of the chain of command was willing to cancel it. The intelligence wasn't ignored out of arrogance. It was ignored because of something older, harder to admit, and much more common in military history than arrogance. Once thousands of aircraft had been assembled, once more than 30,000 men had been briefed, once every headquarters in Britain had committed to the operation, canceling it became harder than believing the intelligence was wrong. That is a lesson bigger than Market Garden. Plans in motion have a weight of their own. Three things had already gone wrong, and none of them could be undone. The bridge at Nijmegen was the longest single-span steel bridge on the Market Garden route. Nearly 2,000 feet across the Waal River, steel truss construction, one of the largest single-span bridges in Europe when it had opened in 1936. It was also wired for demolition on both ends by the German garrison. The 82nd Airborne had landed near Nijmegen on the first day. James Gavin's initial plan called for a company to move on the bridge that afternoon. That plan changed. Gavin, concerned about high ground to the east from which German counterattacks could sever the corridor, ordered his primary effort against the Groesbeek Heights instead of against the bridge. The Groesbeek Heights decision has been debated for 80 years. Gavin's judgment, that losing the heights would collapse the entire operation before it could reach Arnhem, was operationally defensible. Cornelius Rhine later argued the bridge should have been the priority. Both men had their reasons. Both reasons were serious. The result was that the Nijmegen bridge was not seriously assaulted for 3 full days. By September 20th, 30th Corps had finally reached Nijmegen. The bridge was still German-held. The solution was one of the most audacious operations of the entire war. Elements of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, men who had never used a boat in combat, climbed into 32 canvas assault boats and rowed across the Waal River in daylight, under fire, into the fortified northern bank. Nearly half of the first wave did not reach the other side. Those who did stormed the bridge from the far end while British tanks pushed across from the south. The Nijmegen bridge was in Allied hands by nightfall on the 20th. At the northern end of the Nijmegen bridge, 30th Corps was, for the first time in the operation, within striking distance of Arnhem, 11 miles. Frost's battalion at the Arnhem Bridge, what remained of it, had been holding for 3 days, and 30th Corps stopped. The reasons are complicated, and they matter. The Guards' armored division that had crossed the bridge was low on fuel. Their infantry had been chewed apart in the Nijmegen fighting. The road north was reported to be, and in fact was, heavily defended. Continuing the advance in the dark with exhausted crews, low ammunition, and unknown resistance ahead was, in the professional judgment of the Corps commanders present, unacceptable. That professional judgment was almost certainly correct. It was also, for Frost's battalion, a death sentence. Now 4 things had gone wrong: a blown bridge, a worsening sky, 2 SS Panzer divisions the plan couldn't afford to see, and a professional pause on the northern bank of the Waal. Each of them, taken alone, would have been survivable. The plan wasn't built for even one. Return to the bridge. Frost's 2nd Parachute Battalion had reached the northern end of the Arnhem Road Bridge at dusk on September 17th. By the morning of the 18th, they were surrounded. They had roughly 750 men when they took the position. They had rifles, submachine guns, small mortars, Piat anti-tank projectors, and light artillery. They had rations for 2 days. They did not have, and could not be given, anything more. Against them, over 4 days, was rotated the bulk of the 9th SS Panzer Division and elements of the 10th SS Panzer Division. Panzers, half-tracks, SS Panzer Grenadiers who had fought on the Eastern Front in the spring, in Normandy through the summer, and were still refitting when the airborne assault landed on top of them. The fighting at the bridge was, in the estimation of German officers who survived it, some of the hardest urban combat the Waffen-SS had encountered in the entire war. The paratroopers held houses. When the houses were destroyed, they held the cellars. When the cellars became unusable, they held the rubble around the northern bridge ramp. They kept the bridge closed to German traffic for 4 days. By the morning of September 21st, the day this documentary opened with, Frost had been wounded in the leg and was in a cellar being used as a casualty station. Effective command had passed to Major Freddie Goff. Ammunition was almost gone. The Germans had, by that point, brought forward artillery to reduce the paratroopers' positions house by house. The last coherent resistance at the bridge ended in the early hours of September 21st. 4 days later, on the night of September 25th, what remained of the 1st Airborne Division west of Arnhem was withdrawn across the Rhine in a night operation codenamed Berlin. Of the roughly 10,000 men the division had put on the ground across 3 days of drops, roughly 2,400 were evacuated. The rest were dead, wounded, or in German captivity. On the morning of September 26th, the 1st British Airborne Division no longer existed as a fighting formation. It would never again be committed to combat. The battalion at the bridge had done everything a battalion could do. The division had done everything a division could do. 30th Corps had done everything an armored corps could do without abandoning military judgment. And it still failed. Which raises the harder question. If everyone did their job and the plan still failed, what actually killed it? Historians have spent 80 years looking for the mistake. The one wrong decision. The one commander who failed. The 1 hour that broke everything. The list has never been short. The Airborne drops too far from the objectives. The single road that the ground force had to travel. The bridges blown before they could be seized. The weather that grounded reinforcements. The intelligence about the SS Panzer divisions that was ignored. The Nijmegen delay. The Groesbeek decision. The pause on the northern bank of the Waal. Each of those has been argued to be the decisive cause. None of them, taken alone, is. Here is what actually killed Market Garden. Every element in the plan depended on every other element working correctly. The airborne drops depended on daylight, which depended on the weather. The ground advance depended on captured bridges, which depended on airborne drops. The airborne survival depended on ground advance, which depended on the bridges. Reinforcement depended on all three. The plan needed everything. Not everything working within a reasonable margin. Everything working exactly as planned. Imagine a chain. Each link is one part of the plan that has to hold. Airborne, armored, engineering, intelligence, weather, timing. One broken link, and the bridge is never reached. Market Garden was a chain with more links than any operation of the war had attempted, and several of them broke. The Sun Bridge was one of them. The September weather was one of them. The SS Panzer divisions at Arnhem were one of them. The Nijmegen Bridge fell too late by one of them. The pause on the northern bank of the Waal was one of them. Not one of them killed the plan. All of them together did. The blame that fell most heavily fell on Montgomery, the plan's author, and on Browning, the Airborne Corps commander. Some of that blame is deserved. Some of it has been used over the years to avoid a harder question. The harder question is whether any plan of that kind, a plan requiring the coordinated success of airborne, armored, engineering, air resupply, and intelligence operations across 60 miles of hostile territory in 7 days, could have worked against a professionally led enemy in September of 1944. The evidence from other operations in the same period is not encouraging. Operations of similar ambition, before and after Market Garden, that depended on multiple simultaneous successes almost always required conditions Market Garden did not have. Overwhelming numerical superiority, complete surprise, or a broken enemy and unrecoverable retreat. Market Garden had none of those. It had the belief that the German army in the West was already finished. And that belief, in the 3rd week of September 1944, was not yet true. Why has Market Garden remained, for 80 years, one of the most discussed failures of the Second World War? Part of it is the drama. Cornelius Ryan's A Bridge Too Far, published in 1974 and filmed by Richard Attenborough in 1977, made the operation, and John Frost's battalion, permanent fixtures of Second World War memory. Band of Brothers made it universal. Part of it is the human cost. More than 15,000 Allied casualties across 9 days, most of them concentrated in the 1st British Airborne Division, which lost more than 3/4 of its strength. But the deeper reason Market Garden matters is what happened after it failed. The Netherlands remained under German occupation for another 7 months. Its western provinces endured the Hungerwinter, the Hunger Winter of 1944 to 1945, in which as many as 20,000 Dutch civilians died of starvation. The Ardennes offensive in December still came. Central Europe's post-war borders were still drawn. If Market Garden had worked, none of that history would have looked the same. There are 3 deeper reasons Market Garden could not be saved. The first is that any operation depending on the coordinated success of independent elements, airborne, armored, engineering, air resupply, accumulates risk multiplicatively. Each additional link in the chain reduces the probability of overall success. Market Garden had a very long chain. The second is that a plan needing nothing to go wrong cannot survive the ordinary friction of war. Not the extraordinary friction, not bad intelligence, hidden Panzer divisions, weather that would never happen again. Just the ordinary friction. The bridges that get blown before you reach them. The traffic jams on the only road. The drop that lands on the wrong side of the river. Every armed force in history has produced that kind of friction. Market Garden's plan could not accept any of it. The third reason, the one that outlasts the operation itself, is what it revealed about a war running out of time. Market Garden was the plan of an army that believed the war was almost won and could not accept that it wasn't. It was the plan of commanders who preferred one bold gamble to a slow campaign of grinding advances. It was the plan of a coalition that wanted the war finished before winter and that made a decision about a real enemy based on that wish. The German army in the West in September 1944 was tired. It was outnumbered. It was strategically finished. It was not yet operationally broken. Market Garden failed because it needed everything to work at once, in a war that never let anything work at once. The paratroopers who died in the polders and the town squares of the Netherlands were not killed by Montgomery's arrogance, or by 30th Corps' slowness, or by the September rain. They were killed by a plan that assumed nothing would go wrong, in a war that was, by then, mostly things going wrong. The tragedy wasn't that brave men failed. It was that brave men were asked to execute a plan that allowed no ordinary mistakes. The bridge at Arnhem still stands. It was rebuilt after the war and renamed for the man who held it, the John Frost Bridge. Every year, Dutch schoolchildren cross it on the way to class. Every year, on the anniversary, veterans and their descendants gather at the northern end, where Frost's battalion made its stand. And every year, someone asks the same question. Could it have worked? Could someone have saved the plan? The answer that survives 80 years of argument is the same. Every great military plan eventually meets reality. Market Garden met it on September 17th. Thank you for watching. If this is the kind of history you're looking for, subscribe. There's always another story waiting. The next documentary starts right after this one.